What if your 22-year marriage turned out to be a lie? Jerry Hall gave Mick Jagger 4 children. She stood by him for decades, helped build his empire, and lived through the chaos of rock and roll. But when it ended, she walked into court expecting a divorce and walked out with a brutal truth. She was never legally his wife. Their lavish 1990 wedding in Bali? It wasn't valid. No legal rights, no spousal protection, nothing. I walked into that courtroom certain I was Mick's wife, she later said. I left discovering our entire marriage was a legal fiction. Instead of half the fortune, around $150 million, she got a settlement worth just $10 million. No property, no royalties, just silence from the industry that once celebrated her, but she didn't vanish. Today we're pulling back the curtain on Jerry Hall, the betrayal, the survival, and the revenge that made her more powerful than ever. Let's rewind to 1999. After 22 years together, Jerry Hall had finally had enough. Mick Jagger, the man she'd stood by through world tours, drug scandals, and endless tabloid drama, had just fathered a child with Brazilian model Luciana Murad. It wasn't his first affair, not even close, but this one broke something in her. For the first time, Jerry took legal action. She filed for divorce, fully expecting what any long-term partner of a global icon would, half of what they built together. That would have been roughly $150 million. But what Jerry didn't know was that Jagger had been playing a much longer, colder game. When the case reached court, Mick's lawyers pulled a devastating move. They argued that their 1990 wedding in Bali wasn't legally binding. And worse, they had documentation to back it up. Jagger, it turned out, had known all along. Their marriage was never registered under British law. It was symbolic, romantic on the surface, but legally meaningless. Jerry hadn't just been betrayed emotionally, she'd been outmaneuvered legally. I thought I was his wife, she said. Instead, I was just a long-term girlfriend with no rights. 22 years, 4 kids, and legally, I didn't exist. The court agreed. Jerry's status as wife was voided, and with it went her financial leverage. She walked away with a $10 million settlement, about 3% of the Jagger empire. Just like that, 2 decades of sacrifice and shared life were reduced to a footnote. Mick kept the houses, the investments, the legacy. People think I walked away with this massive fortune, Jerry later said. The truth? I could barely afford to keep the family home. Mick had 7 houses. I was clinging to one. Even more painful was the silence from the fashion world. No solidarity, no support. The same magazines that once celebrated her beauty now ignored her heartbreak. I realized I was completely alone, she recalled. At 43, with 4 kids, no degree, and a career in an industry that throws women away after 30. But Jerry Hall wasn't done. Not even close. Before the runways, before the rock stars, before the betrayal, Jerry Hall was just a tall, awkward teenager growing up in a small Texas town with a dark undercurrent. Born in Gonzales in 1956, her world was far from the glitz of Paris and London. Her father, John, was a long-haul trucker with a violent temper and a drinking problem. Her mother, Marjorie, worked multiple jobs to keep food on the table for Jerry and her 4 sisters. What outsiders saw as a classic Southern upbringing was, in truth, a home filled with fear. My father would come home drunk and beat my mother, Jerry wrote in her autobiography, a truth fashion magazines conveniently skipped. We used to hide under the bed, listening to her screams. The turning point came when Jerry was just 12. One night, her mother snapped. She grabbed a shotgun, pointed it at her husband, and told him to leave for good. It worked. That single act of courage left an indelible mark on Jerry. My mother became my hero that night, she said. She taught me 2 things: never depend on a man to save you, and never let anyone break your spirit. That fire followed Jerry as she set out to escape Texas. She was tall, striking, and unmistakably ambitious. At 17, she used her savings from part-time jobs to buy a one-way ticket to France. But Paris was no fairy tale. Her first modeling agent took her passport, claimed she owed him money for career development, and began sending her to private castings, men posing as fashion clients, offering money for access. Jerry refused, and she paid the price. Dropped by the agency, penniless and alone in a foreign country, she found herself sleeping in Paris metro stations and surviving off bakery scraps. I was terrified. I called home crying, she said, but we didn't have the money for a plane ticket back. My mom told me, "You wanted this life, now go figure it out." And she did. On the street one day, Jerry spotted model Marie Helvin, already a rising star. Desperate, she approached her and told her everything. Marie offered her a couch and, more importantly, an introduction. Fashion illustrator Antonio Lopez. Antonio didn't just sketch clothes, he discovered stars. "He saw something in me," Jerry later said. "He told me, 'Your height isn't a liability, it's your trademark, your accent. Keep it. The world doesn't need another mannequin.'" That advice reshaped Jerry's image. She leaned into her Texan roots, developed a walk that Thierry Mugler would later call a sexual revolution in motion, and embraced her sensual, powerful presence. The girl who once slept in subway stations now had the fashion world watching her every step. But this was just the beginning. By the late 1970s, Jerry Hall wasn't just another model, she was a force. 6 feet tall, all curves and confidence, with a Texan drawl and a presence that refused to be ignored. She wasn't trying to blend in, she was trying to take over. And she wasn't alone. This was the golden age of supermodels, when beauty met business and cover girls became global icons. Jerry's rivals weren't lightweights, they were legends in the making. Iman, the statuesque Somali beauty who became Yves Saint Laurent's ultimate muse. Lauren Hutton, the all-American star with a gap-toothed smile that redefined what beauty could be. Janice Dickinson, the self-declared first supermodel, known as much for her wild antics as her face. Photographers, editors, and designers pit them against each other in a ruthless competition for magazine covers, endorsements, and runway dominance. Every booking was a battle, every contract a high-stakes win. The competition was brutal, remembered famed photographer Francesco Scavullo. They weren't just modeling, they were fighting for brand identity, for cultural influence. The rivalry between Jerry and Iman was particularly fierce. Jerry brought bombshell glamour, blonde, buxom, charismatic. Iman brought otherworldly elegance, regal, poised, and multilingual. "They were opposites in every way," said former Vogue editor Grace Mirabella. Jerry would joke with the crew, full of Texan charm. Iman would float into the room like royalty, discussing politics and art in 5 languages. Designers played favorites. Halston loved Jerry. Saint Laurent adored Iman. Others tried to book both, not because they meshed, but because the contrast made headlines. Beyond beauty, they were savvy. When Jerry landed a revolutionary deal with Revlon in 1978, not just a fee, but a percentage of sales. Iman would later launch her own cosmetics empire, further cementing her legacy as both a model and a businesswoman. These weren't passive muses, they were architects of their own empires. "We weren't friends," Jerry admitted years later, "but we respected each other. We were both outsiders, both immigrants in our own way, and we knew how fast the industry could forget you." While Iman reigned in haute couture and Hutton in American editorials, Jerry claimed her crown in Europe. France and Italy fell in love with her theatrical flair, her exaggerated femininity, her refusal to shrink into the background. Jerry Hall was among the first models to aggressively negotiate her contracts, including a groundbreaking deal with Revlon in the late 1970s. In one 12-month stretch, she appeared on over 40 international magazine covers, a record at the time. She was no longer just a model, she was the model. But while Jerry was mastering the fashion world, a storm was brewing in her personal life, and it came with a Rolling Stones soundtrack. In 1976, Jerry Hall was on top of the world, commanding 5-figure modeling fees, walking for the biggest designers, and headlining magazine covers across Europe. She was in a committed relationship with Roxy Music's Brian Ferry, and her future looked unstoppable. Then Mick Jagger entered the picture. What tabloids later romanticized as a whirlwind love story began with obsession. Jagger, married to Bianca at the time, saw Jerry in a Roxy Music album shoot and became fixated. He started calling her constantly, dozens of times a day. He sent flowers, wrote notes, and even showed up at Jerry and Brian's home in the middle of the night, high and shouting. "I thought it was passion," Jerry later admitted. Looking back, it was stalking. She eventually left Ferry, a decision that would define the next 22 years of her life. What followed was not the glamorous rock and roll romance the media projected. It was chaos, affairs, gaslighting, power games. From the outside, they looked like royalty, a golden couple on private jets, red carpets, and front rows. But behind closed doors, Jerry was unraveling. Mick cheated constantly, she revealed, and every time I caught him, he'd make me feel like I was imagining it. There were lipstick stains on his clothes, hotel receipts in cities he'd never mentioned, paparazzi photos with women she didn't know. Each time, he'd deny, deflect, and manipulate. Classic emotional abuse disguised as celebrity drama. Her confidence began to crack. The once dominant model was now suffering from panic attacks, hiding in bathroom stalls before runway shows, barely able to eat. Yet fashion magazines still called her lucky. I was dying inside while smiling on Vogue covers, she confessed. People saw the mansions, they didn't see the crying, the isolation, the shame. So why did she stay? Because it wasn't that simple. She loved him. They had children. And crucially, Mick had made sure everything was in his name. For tax purposes, he claimed. Jerry didn't realize until much later just how legally exposed she was. Every time I packed a suitcase, he'd turn into the man I first fell in love with. Loving, charming, apologetic. It was a cycle I couldn't escape. That cycle lasted over 2 decades, until the betrayal became public, until the courtroom revealed the lie, and until Jerry finally said, enough. After the courtroom ambush that left her with just 3% of the fortune she helped build, many assumed Jerry Hall was finished. She was 43, heartbroken, and in an industry that routinely discarded women after 30. The narrative was clear. She'd been used, outsmarted, and discarded. End of story. But Jerry wasn't interested in playing the victim. She was about to write her own second act, one nobody saw coming. The first move? Her memoir. While most celebrity autobiographies are sanitized fluff, Jerry's was anything but. It pulled back the curtain on her life with Mick Jagger. The charm, the control, the years of emotional erosion. She exposed how he scheduled Rolling Stones tours to clash with her biggest modeling gigs, forcing her to choose between work and motherhood. Mick never had to make that choice, she wrote, but I did, every time. The book became a bestseller, earning her more in royalties than she'd received in her entire divorce settlement. More importantly, it gave her a voice and reclaimed her narrative. Then came her most daring move yet, The Graduate. In 2000, at age 44, Jerry took on the role of Mrs. Robinson in a London stage production of the iconic play. It required full nudity. Critics called it career suicide. Her agents begged her to reconsider. Even Mick scoffed at the idea, calling it desperate. Jerry did it anyway. The show sold out for its entire run. Audiences who came expecting a tabloid train wreck stayed to witness a revelation. Critics praised her emotional depth and presence. Overnight, she went from rock star's ex to legitimate stage actress. But her final and most calculated move came 16 years later, when she married billionaire media mogul Rupert Murdoch. The headlines were merciless. Gold digger. Revenge marriage. But what no one knew at the time was that Jerry had negotiated one of the strongest prenuptial agreements in celebrity history. After what happened with Mick, I wasn't taking any chances, she told a friend. This time, I had my own lawyers, my own team, my own rules. When the marriage ended in 2022, Jerry walked away with a settlement reportedly worth over $100 million, 10 times what she received from Jagger. Today, her estimated net worth is around $120 million, most of it earned after the age of 45. And Mick, despite his wealth and legacy, he now lives in a world where Jerry Hall is no longer an accessory to his story. She's the headline. For most models, hitting 40 is the end. For Jerry Hall, it was just intermission. While her peers disappeared quietly from the spotlight, or desperately clung to youth through surgery and reinvention, Jerry did something radical. She aged in public, on her terms. The fashion industry discards women at the exact moment they become most interesting. Jerry said in a 2022 interview, "They want your face before you have a story. Then once you do, they call you irrelevant." She refused that script. Instead of hiding wrinkles, she highlighted them. Instead of chasing youth, she embraced maturity. Her Instagram feed began to reflect this philosophy, a mix of unfiltered selfies, vintage flashbacks, and candid photos showing her as she is, older, wiser, and entirely unconcerned with pleasing the industry that once defined her. "I earned every line on my face," she said. "Each one represents a lesson, a memory, a moment I survived." This honesty struck a nerve. Women in their 40s, 50s, even 20s began seeing Jerry not just as a former supermodel, but as something rarer, a guide to aging with power and dignity. And she didn't stop at selfies. She began speaking out against the toxic beauty standards she once helped uphold, criticizing the obsession with youth, the pressure to erase age, and the industry's refusal to let older women remain visible. Her stance resonated. Articles called her a pioneer of age-positive beauty. Major fashion outlets began revisiting her legacy with new eyes, not just as the woman on Mick Jagger's arm, but as a blueprint for reinvention. In a culture that teaches women to shrink with age, Jerry had done the opposite. She grew louder, bolder, freer. The secret they don't want women to know, she said, is that your 50s and 60s can be the most liberated time of your life. You stop apologizing, you stop shrinking, you finally live for yourself. It wasn't just talk. She lived it. Red carpet appearances with minimal makeup, silver streaks in her hair, honest interviews about menopause, body changes, and confidence. Young women who had once been taught to fear aging started quoting her online. One fan on TikTok put it simply, "Jerry Hall is the first woman I ever saw who made 60 look like power." Jerry Hall didn't just leave a mark on fashion, she rewrote its rules. Her impact stretches far beyond covers and catwalks. It's woven into how models are paid, how they walk, and how beauty is defined. 1. She changed the money. Before Jerry, models were treated like disposable talent. Flat fees, no royalties, no equity. But in 1978, she did something unheard of. She negotiated a percentage-based contract with Revlon, tying her earnings to the success of their ad campaign. That single move shifted the power dynamic between models and brands. Jerry's deal was the prototype, said Ivan Bart, former president of IMG Models. When Gigi Hadid or Kendall Jenner secure equity stakes today, they're following the template Jerry created. She was no longer just the face of a product, she had a financial stake in its success. 2. She changed the walk. In the early days, models were expected to be silent mannequins, blank expressions, mechanical strides. Jerry blew that apart. Her runway walk was electric, a dramatic, hip-swaying strut that designer Thierry Mugler famously called a sexual revolution in motion. She turned every runway into a performance. Tyra Banks later said that watching Jerry inspired her own signature, fierce walk. Coco Rocha cited her as the reason she embraced theatricality. Even Bella Hadid studied Jerry's vintage runway clips to build her own distinctive style. Jerry didn't walk the runway, Hadid told Vogue. She owned it. She made it a stage. 3. She changed the body. In the age of rail-thin models and the coat hanger aesthetic, Jerry stood 6 feet tall with unapologetic curves. She was bold, glamorous, and physically commanding, and she refused to shrink herself to fit anyone's expectations. In doing so, she created space for models with different body types and attitudes. She made glamour powerful again. Jerry made it okay to take up space, said model Ashley Graham. She was sexy, strong, and in control, all at once. She showed us that beauty doesn't have to be small. Today, Jerry Hall stands as a fashion icon, a survivor of rock and roll's darkest edges, and a blueprint for female reinvention. She rose from domestic violence and homelessness to command the runways of Paris. She built an empire, lost it, then built another, all while raising 4 children and defying every expectation placed on women her age. She didn't just survive the industry, she changed it. And in doing so, Jerry Hall became more than a supermodel. She became a symbol, not of beauty, but of what it means to return stronger. Remember to subscribe, like, and share. See you soon in another captivating story about fashion industry icons.